auditioned for David McPhail and the producers of a week of it, and got the part, and I was so thrilled. I was the only female out of all the male performers at the time, so I got a huge range of parts to play. It was such fun. It was really fly by the seat of your pants stuff, because we actually recorded live as well in the Civic Theatre in Christchurch to a live audience, and then I think they had half an hour to kind of, you know, to iron out a few problems, get rid of the swear words, and then it went to air. I was often called upon to be, you know, the token Māori or the token bag lady, or, you know, and I sometimes felt a bit uncomfortable about that, you know, or the token tart. I was regularly the token tart, or the token prostitute, or you know what I mean. We did a spoof on the in-flight instructional thing that the cabin crew do to passengers. And they said, you know, they used to say, "Have you seen this?" And it was actually supposed to be the card, you know. But in this particular sketch, they said, I said, "Have you seen this?" And I lifted my skirt over my head. I mean, you know, it was like, I was going, oh my God, my parents are going to be watching this. And the reaction from the public was hysterical, because every time, you know, I flew on a plane and I was on that thing, you know, people was kind of, everybody watched the show, you know, so they were kind of expecting me to lift my skirt up above my head. And actually the Air New Zealand changed their in-flight briefing after that to "Have you seen this card?" to be specific. But it's very funny. That was an amazing shoot, because I trained with Alison Rowe to run, because I wasn't a runner. I was also rehearsing for Chicago at the Mercury, so I was swimming you know, a couple of miles every day, and running with Alison Rowe every day, and biking and going to dance classes, and I was the fittest I'd ever been in my life. So, you know, I was really fit for that film. But nevertheless, it was a big ask, because there were great long tracking shots with, you know, with the crew on the back of a truck and me running behind and them going, run faster, run faster. It's like, for Christ's sake, I'm going as fast as I can go. You know, I was really exhausted after those days. It was also a feminist movie made specifically, you know, to show that women don't always have to be the victim, you know. Which, you know, I mean, I didn't feel that strongly about. I suppose I should have, but I wasn't that politically aware. I think I'm much more so now. She was such a high maintenance character. She was very garrulous. I don't think I ever had less than, you know, 25 to 30 scenes a week for 4 years. That's a huge weight of work. And so I didn't have a life, you know, I just worked the whole time. And I mean, you come home and you learn lines for the next day. You know, you learn lines all weekend with a part like that. But the script writers fed my character such deliciously, wonderfully mad storylines. You know, she was a joy to play. She was completely off the wall, that character. And I loved her, you know. People did tend to confuse her with me, and I remember going into the supermarket once and a woman came and grabbed my arm, you know, and she said, "Now, how's that slut, Barb?" Like that. And I said, "Well, actually, I've just come in for soup and my name's Annie." But, you know, they really believe, and I was always getting reprimanded. "Why don't you keep your boys in order? You know, where are your boys?" Most of us who worked with him on that would say none of us really got to know what he's really like, you know what I mean? Even though I spent a lot of time sitting marooned in a set with him, waiting for lights to be changed or doors to be taken off cars, and nattering, you know. And he told me a lot of personal stuff about himself, which was very surprising. But I was always on my best behaviour. No, because I could never forget who I was acting with. And even though he had I don't know if I should say this or not, but he used to go and have a curry nearly every night. So he had wind problems, but I'd never ever have drawn attention to it because of who he was. You know what I mean? It wasn't. I never felt I knew him well enough to say, "Was that you?" I didn't really enjoy working on Outrageous Fortune very much. I think because I didn't quite believe the character that I was playing. And also, it's quite hard to come in, and I mean, I'm sure it was the same for guest artists on Shortland Street, to come into a well-oiled machine and actors who work, have worked with each other for such a long time. It wasn't that I felt unwelcome, but I felt superfluous, and I felt insecure, and yeah, I didn't feel at ease at all. You know, I didn't have to. I was just a guest role, and so I didn't have time to kind of fit in. You know what I mean? So
interesting.
And it is interesting, and it's interesting to see how that feeling can affect your performance. You know, because if you don't feel at home where you are and at home with what you're doing, you can't relax into the character. I was so thrilled that Fiona Samuel had the tenacity to push that story, because she'd been working on it for about 12 years, you know, and trying to get it made. Because it was a story that needed to be told. And after it went to air, and it went to air twice, which I thought, and you know, within a year, which I thought was amazing, people were coming up to me, you know, in supermarkets and saying, "Thank you so much for telling my story." And people were really touched by that. Yeah, it was quite harrowing. It was an interesting role for me because the woman was so unlike me. She was acquiescent and didn't talk about stuff and didn't vent her anger or her frustration. She just kind of lived in this little capsule with this withdrawal, you know. So it was a real challenge for me, because I tend to be quite out there as an actor, and I'm always being told less is Annie, less is more, less is more, you know, pull it back, pull it back. And on this occasion I really did. I really had to, and whenever too much personality was coming, or my personality was coming out, you know, Fiona would say, "Just pull it back, you know, just pull it back." And because she was quite a small person, you know, inside, really. It was a really beautiful film. I felt exhausted when we'd finished. And I had to do all sorts of things that, you know, that I'd never done before, like take my top off and bare my breasts, you know, which I was like, oh my God, you know, at my age. What's my mother going to think of that, I thought. I've always suffered from a certain lack of confidence, so I approach every new role with diffidence, you know, and somewhat alarm. I don't know how that has really affected me for the future, except I always go out of my way, if guest people come on to something that I'm working on, to try and make them feel at home, because I know what it's like not to feel at home. And too often actors are too busy, you know. I think it's important, especially young people who might be really, really, really nervous. It's agonising to be in this career, but it's also hugely rewarding, and you never ever stop learning, and I guess that's the big bonus, is that it keeps your brain ticking over. I'm kind of worried now that I'm, you know, getting into my mid-60s, that I'm going to stop being able to remember my lines. That's a bit of an anxiety. But as long as I'm doing stage plays, I think, you know, where I have to keep remembering stuff, I'll be right.